September 15th, and I'm off for another ride on my scooter. This time I'm going back up into the Madawaska Highland area, and welcome to my trip. I hope you stay with me. This is a two-part video. Anyway, we started off there in the small town of Plevna, and I looked it up online. It's a typical town that grew up where colonization roads joined, and it was a supply town for the surrounding area and a stop-off place. Anyway, it originally was called Buckshot, but apparently the post office didn't like that name, so they had to change it. One of the residents knew of some trouble in Plevna, Bulgaria at the time, in the 1860s, and they decided to name it Plevna because it had similar issues at the time. Anyway, so we're going up the Buckshot Lake Road, kind of northwest into the Highlands. It's quite a nice drive up here. Odds and ends of ponds and creeks, and quite a quiet road. A good road though, very smooth for the most part. Not too much traffic during the week. You can see the colors are just starting to change here and there. There's the remains of an old homestead. I always wonder at the story behind these old places, that pioneers had come up here and onto the top of the hill and seen the land and the view, and thought it would be a great place to settle. So the next town we're coming into is Venichar. Quite a name, but apparently it was named after a lake in Scotland, and a lot of the immigrants up here, settlers, were Scottish. Now this church you see on the left-hand side is an important landmark in this area. This town was getting quite large by the 1900s. With hotels, sawmills, schools, even a new school was built. And but unfortunately, in 1903, a fire probably started in one of the outlying regions on a farm or whatever, spread through the forest and burnt just about all of the town down, except that one church and one home. It did build up a little bit after the fire, but never to its former glory. And in the day, it was mainly a stop-off place, a service town for the lumber industry, which was growing, and settlers, outlying farms, would get their supplies here. This is Venichar Junction. I couldn't find too much online about this area, this town itself, but obviously it was maybe grew up after the Highway 41, which we're on now, came into being. This was quite a nice ride up here, and in another few weeks, a month perhaps, the trees up here are going to be really colorful, so I might take another drive later on. And again, this road, I imagine on the weekend with cottagers, it can get a little bit busier, but there's never too much traffic up this way. It makes for a nice drive. And we're just coming through the Denby area. But unfortunately, I couldn't find too much information online about Denby, and I think it's one of the larger towns up here now, anyway. So until I find something else about it, I guess I'll have to leave it at that. So we stay on the 41, heading north now. Still in the Madawaska Highlands, and obviously you see the hills in the distance once in a while. There aren't too many names of mountains that I could actually pick out for you. There's Rose Hill, Leather Root Mountain, odds and ends like that around. There's even one road off to the left up here somewhere called No Name Road. So I guess they ran out of names, or they couldn't think of one. A lot of them seem to be named after places they are going. Like Rose Hill is a small town, and the road to it is called Rose Hill Road. Every once in a while, the view is broken up and given a little bit more interest with a lake or a pond or a river. Some wet areas always make for interesting viewing. I didn't see too much wildlife. Of course, it was in the middle of the day, so I don't expect to see too much. This is just a nice drive. It was getting quite warm around this time in September, so moving along my bike provided some cooling down. There's some nice hills in the distance there. Anyway, we've got to Griffith and turned onto the Highland Road. And this is where we, on my last video, I had stopped at the rest area there, up next to the Madawaska River. And this is the small road that goes along the Madawaska next to the rest area. It's quite a nice river at this point, still quite wide, and not into the park yet, but just up the road here it becomes the Madawaska River Provincial Park. You can actually, I believe you can take the river all the way from Algonquin Park, because the Madawaska goes through Algonquin as well. There's where the river starts to narrow a little bit, and there's some rapids up ahead. There aren't too many places to stop along here, though, for the public to view. There are few private cottages and homes. So they have a really nice quiet area to enjoy the river, living next to the river. I continue up here for a while on a very well maintained gravel road. This bridge, even though it looks a little worn, is still quite good. Now off to the right now is Crown Land. Here we just entering into the unserviced road, forest access road. So enter at your own risk, as they say. I believe we're about right here. So we probably are on Crown land, but the road goes through private land a little bit and then comes back into the Crown land, and it's all Crown land up this part here. So I'm going to go a little bit further until we come to that sharp bend and see what the creek looks like around that area. Just exploring and going around and seeing possible campsites. This is probably on private land here, but even when I start getting into the Crown land section around this bend, a lot has been logged over next to the creek. So any ideas of having a nice camp? I suppose you still could camp there, but because of the sticks and cutoffs from the logging, it's kind of hard to traverse with a scooter through the bush. But it's still a nice ride through here. As you can see, mostly used by four-wheelers. So I stop here and figure out which way I want to go. So I keep going off into the smaller roads, and this trail here is maintained by the snowmobile club in the winter. So they keep up these bridges or whatever. I imagine the whoever logs up here also needs to maintain the road. These again are pretty little spots, but access to any little wild camping spots is a little few and far between. Nice little creek. You could even put in here if you wanted to do some paddling, I imagine. Not too many places to park, but you could. But when you're out just riding around enjoying the area, it's nice to stop and stretch your legs and take a look at the scenery. Taking your time and enjoying the reason for the ride in the first place is just to get out and relax and take your time. As you can see, there are quite a few black flies up here. I imagine it's a combination of it being the fall and the weather being extremely warm for this type of year. I actually saw more black flies this fall than I did in the spring, which is when we usually get them in my area. So this is one trail that leads loops around and leads into the bush on the other side of the creek. And this is through a logged over area. I could comfortably drive along here with no issues for quite a while, and Then it started getting a little rougher after these turns here and going downhill, so I thought, well, it's not, I didn't feel like sweating too much trying to get back up the hills after. So I came along, parked, and just had a look at the general area up here. Noticed some deer tracks. And I imagine this whole area is full of the deer, especially in open areas like this. I imagine they come to feed or whatever. But you can see all the brush down on the ground, the branches, etc. from previous logging. And it's just impossible, even hard enough to walk down through there, let alone take a scooter. You could camp on the top there, I suppose, but being all crown land, but it's not very pretty. Anyway, a little further up the road, where there are plantations of trees from years past. There are these trails in and out of the plantations, and quite easy to drive on. Very grassy, is smooth. So I thought I'd go in and check one out. Now all this whole area, if it wasn't for the black flies this fall, up in here, this would be quite a nice place to camp out. You could go off on one of the side trails and be quite remote. I continued on a little bit on this trail, but as it went down into the bush more, the trail became a little rougher, so I could only go so far, or well, I only wanted to go so far. I suppose if you wanted to bushwhack a little bit and clear some branches out the way and trees or whatever, you could go further, but I wasn't really equipped to do that. And I have only so much clearance. I'll have to measure the clearance I have on this scooter, but more than my previous Kimco, but still not a lot. And the tread on the tires isn't aggressive enough to give me good traction in soft earth or sand, or and when it gets wet, it's even worse. So I go down here, and then obviously I decide to turn back at this point. One day it would be nice to see how far that goes, though. Looks like even the four-wheelers haven't come down here in a little while. But I do notice just at the top of this little hill here, next to the main trail, somebody has cleared in a little area with a whippersnipper or whatever, and even put an outhouse hidden by trees and branches. So they plan to come back here in hunting season, which is probably around I think into November for the deer season. So they probably plan to come up here with a trailer and camp for a week or so. Just off to the left here is where they've made a little clearing. But like I said, there are a few trails, not as clean as this one, but off to the right, every once in a while, you'll see a grown over trail down the side through the trees. And it wouldn't be hard to go down through there and lots of perfect trees for a hammock, that's for sure. So I continue back along the way I had come. I come along the road going west along the Madawaska, and notice a sign for Crooked Rapids on the Madawaska River, the Lower Madawaska River Provincial Park it's called. Anyway, so I decided to go down and check out the rapids. The road's a little bit more interesting down here, a little narrower and not so well groomed, which makes for a more interesting ride. So this road was good. I take a little easier when it gets a little rougher, and when they've put down some gravel to repair the roads, I take a little easier. You can see some areas that are still wet. So sometimes this mud could get very slippery for my tires, so I take a little bit easier. But on the whole, it's a very nice ride down through here. I like riding down these small trails. Actually, it's almost like hiking or on a footpath, because you are slow and open to all the sounds and sights and smells. Here's some of that looser gravel that I was talking about. It can be hard to ride on, a little slippery because of the roundness of the rocks and the small rocks like here. But if you take it slow and easy, it's good. Now here I come to the small parking area, the entrance to or one of the entrances to the park and Crooked Rapids. So I hope you've enjoyed this first part of the video and sharing my ride, and hope you can stay tuned or tune in to the next one where you can actually see these beautiful rapids that is open to the public. So as I said, it's been a great day for riding, and because of the flies, I can't exactly sit down and enjoy my sandwich, so I just kind of have it and standing and walk around for a bit, listen to the birds, have some water, and just relax. Ready for a hike down the trail, take a look at the rapids. There's some hiking trails coming through here too, and I guess that's the parking area is used for that. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Please stay tuned.